So we're going to talk about building an AMP compatible WordPress site today. I'm a developer programs engineer. My name is Felix, and I work in Google in a team where we want to simplify the creation of great user experiences when publishing on CMS platforms. And because WordPress is the most popular by far, that's why we mostly focus on the WordPress ecosystem. So we want to bring the necessary capabilities to create great user experience to the platform in an easy-to-use way. I'm also a WordPress core committer, and I've contributed to the platform for many, many years. And some of the projects that I'm involved in as part of our team is, for example, the Google Sitekit plugin you may have heard of, the PWA plugin, which brings progressive web app features to WordPress, and of course the AMP plugin, which is part of what we're going to focus on today. So as part of this, the session will be split into four different pieces. So at first I will give an introduction to the AMP framework, what it actually is. The second part will be how you can use AMP in WordPress. The third part will be the actual part where we do some live coding and hands-on workshop, and then at the end I will add a little bit on the stuff that we have hopefully learned on the way. So first, I don't know who here has heard about AMP, or are you familiar with AMP, what AMP is? Okay, so in either case, I think I'm going to go one of the most common misconceptions about AMP is that it is only for very, very simple static websites. So you may have seen this on the left side here. You may have seen that there are websites that have a secondary AMP version, which is this rather boring replication of your actual site. Here on the right side, on the left side, on the right side, you see a secondary version that is AMP compatible, but it looks not really like the original site. However, that is really a thing of the past. So AMP, in the beginning when AMP came up, which was like 4 years ago, it was quite limited. So it was necessary to have a secondary version because it was impossible to replicate the entire experience you wanted to have on the original site. Today, though, it's possible to build your entire site in AMP, which is what we see on the right. You don't need to have a secondary version because having a secondary version of your website is, as you may think, pointless. Why do you want to have more work maintaining 2 versions of your website? But now with that out of the way, let's look closer at what AMP is in general. So AMP is first and foremost a web components framework to easily create user-first websites. I will briefly talk about what web components are in just a bit, but for now I want to also mention that AMP is not only available for websites. You can also build emails, stories like something like Instagram, and ads in an AMP-compatible way. Originally, AMP, you may know it as meaning accelerated mobile pages, but this abbreviation has actually been dropped. It's no longer in use. Now it's just AMP. That's just the name of the thing. Don't think about what it means, basically. But yeah, AMP, the reason it has changed because it's not about accelerated mobile pages. AMP works on mobile as well as on desktop, so the name is kind of misleading, although originally it was focused only on mobile. So using the AMP framework, in generally, it helps your website to implement best practices and provide a first-class user experience, great performance, and with all of that, also facilitating SEO. Another important part of AMP is its open source nature. So just as WordPress democratizes publishing, AMP basically democratizes performance, which is a key part of user experience. So the democratization, it is supported by the open nature of the project. So first of all, it is an open source project, so anyone can contribute on GitHub, and there's also an open Slack channel where you can discuss. It has an open governance model. So while the project was originally started by Google, the project is now officially driven by many different individuals and companies, including Automatic, Pantheon, Microsoft, Pinterest, Twitter, and a couple more. And last but not least, AMP is built on the open web. So basically, AMP pages can be viewed in any browser. They are just HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript. And so AMP is not a proprietary solution that only works on a closed platform. So it's different from example, from the instant articles that Facebook offers. So now I want to briefly mention what web components are, because AMP, as said, is a web components framework. So web components is an umbrella term for some native browser APIs that have come up in the last couple of years. And they are already supported by all modern browsers. And web components basically allows you to define your own HTML tags, including how they semantically behave, what they mark up, what it looks like, and also how the interactive behavior of them it works. So AMP relies on this native browser capability to provide certain components that you can use. Also, these custom tags that you define, they're called custom elements, and you can always tell that something is a custom element because it has a dash. I don't know, it's probably a bit hard to see, but it has a dash in the tag name. So custom elements always have a dash in the tag name because the non-dash versions are reserved for built-in HTML tags. So here, for example, the AMP-IMG is AMP's alternative to the regular IMG tag, which has performance features like lazy loading built in, for example. There are tons of AMP components, and most of them also have a respective custom element. But what makes AMP so powerful? The thing is that most web frameworks today heavily rely on JavaScript, so they render all the entire documents on the client side, thus put all the heavy load on the user's machine. Aside from media, JavaScript on your website is one of the highest costs and has the most negative impact on your website's processing and download time. And we need to always consider that download speed across the world and various devices varies greatly. So just because it's fast for you, it doesn't mean it's fast for everybody else. So too often, JavaScript, when you add JavaScript to your site, you just do it. It happens too rarely that we always think. You should always think about, how does this impact performance? Do I really need this JavaScript feature? Can I do it another way? Think, for example, many features that you used to need JavaScript for back in the day, now you can accomplish with just HTML and CSS. We shouldn't need to use JavaScript anymore. Same with, another one of the biggest problems is, for example, loading tracking scripts or analytics providers or ads from third parties. Especially if you add more and more and more of them, your site becomes really slow really easily. Basically, think about it that way. WordPress democratizes publishing content, and it does a great job at it. But we also need to think about democratizing consuming that content in a solid way, because otherwise the web basically it just becomes a mess for the users. So because of that, AMP is mostly an HTML framework. AMP heavily restricts custom JavaScript. And instead, with HTML and CSS, it relies on the ever-present foundational technologies of the web. So when you look at these two tweets here, which is here, the web has always consisted of HTML and CSS. While on the right, you see JavaScript ecosystem. New things every day. That's just a very small extract of everything that has come up, actually. So it's impossible to keep up with all of the development that happens in the JavaScript ecosystem, and especially the performance implications that each of these frameworks might have. So as such, again, AMP is primarily an HTML framework. However, still, I just want to add that that doesn't mean that AMP considers JavaScript to be inherently bad. So in fact, also AMP itself is built in JavaScript, and you can also use JavaScript in a certain capacity, as if it is absolutely necessary. However, every time you do that, think about a better way, because AMP offers a lot of alternatives to using JavaScript. And let's look at some of the examples for that now. So, for example, when being an HTML framework, AMP accomplishes the interactivity parts and the parts typically handled by JavaScript by using declarative HTML tags and attributes. So instead of putting a Google Analytics script or any other tracking provider script into your page, you use the AMP Analytics custom element. And what the AMP Analytics custom element does is it improves performance, first of all, by bypassing the scripts, and it directly talks to the analytics providers instead. And if you have multiple tracking scripts, which sometimes you may need, it the AMP Analytics component always batches all of these events and sends them in one go, rather than, so that spares CPU power and the battery of the user's device. So this, especially when you have multiple tracking scripts, this significantly improves performance. Another more visual example here is this carousel. Is it? Yeah, so it's moving, nice. So in AMP, there is a component for this kind of thing, like AMP Carousel, that you just drop into your page. This is it. And AMP offers several other custom elements for certain typical components that you want to typically include in your website. Think about how complex it can sometimes be to implement a slider in a regular way with JavaScript. And now look at this, is really just, you put the HTML tag and it works. Or you can also use even more custom interactions. For example, here, we want to have, when you click on this image, I want to open an image lightbox. So in order to do that, AMP uses an approach called with actions and events. So it's kind of similar, like if you know regular JavaScript. So here you basically listen on the tap event, which is just AMP's version of click or tap. It works for all kinds of different ways to click on something. So you just listen to when someone taps this image, then you target the lightbox element by using its ID, and then you call the open action on the AMP lightbox so that it opens when you hit the click the image. And this, basically here, you've accomplished something with the AMP's HTML mechanisms that you would otherwise have needed JavaScript for again. And this declarative markup here, instead of using JavaScript, is the most important part about this is that it allows AMP to guarantee performance, because this markup, and what it does, is predictable and validatable. So predictability here, for example, it solves layout shifting, which is one of the most annoying things on the web today. Think about, you've probably seen that before. You were on a website and you wanted to click a button, but when you were about to click it, the button suddenly shifted, and this is terrible. With AMP, this gets solved because the entire page layout is statically defined and it's predictable, because even if something gets loaded slowly, AMP already has the space reserved for it. And the validatability is really important, because that allows the AMP framework to notify you whenever you are doing something that may hurt performance. So in fact, there is a place where you can validate your AMP pages, and that is the AMP Validator. That you can. It's kind of similar like the W3C validator. If your AMP page contains errors, it is not AMP compatible. And the difference between the AMP validator and the W3C validator, of course, is that AMP includes a lot of more. It goes a lot further. So it focuses on performance and UX best practices. So whenever you have a violation here, that likely means your site could do a little better in that. And you can even integrate the validator directly with your development workflows, because of course you don't want to always paste your site there. So you can, for example, hook it in your continuous integration, and so that the script always checks your markup when you change code. Now that we've seen an invalid AMP document in this demo, so let's look at the minimal correct AMP document. As you can see, it's really just HTML and CSS. There are a couple of extras, like you need to load the AMP library, and you also need to include a minimal style sheet for basic styles from AMP. And of course, there is an AMP attribute in the HTML tag. So we have so far touched on really 2 of the 3 main pieces that AMP consists of. Again, to summarize, this is a web components framework. It has a powerful validation mechanism. And last but not least, there's a cloud piece. So first of all, the CDN. So the AMP framework is typically loaded from a CDN. And that ensures that the library that you load is always up to date. It's also backwards compatible, so there will not be any breakage. And this is also referred to as AMP as a service. The other piece is the AMP cache, and there are a lot of misconceptions about that. So the AMP caches, they're basically used by some external services. For example, Google Search uses it, Bing Search uses it, Twitter or Cloudflare also uses an AMP cache. And an AMP cache allows your website to be pre-rendered For example, if you search for something on Google search, it is possible for all the AMP pages that show up in the results to immediately be loaded when you hit the search, when you are in the search. So that means whenever you click on some of these pages, they load up instantly, like truly with 0 seconds load time. And that is made possible by pre-rendering. So the thing is that theoretically anyone could pre-render a website. However, with pre-rendering, you have to load the entire page. So for example, if you have tracking scripts on your page, they would fire although the person has not actually been to your site. But how AMP solves that is that it makes the pre-rendering available in a privacy-preserving way because of the way that the AMP components work. So they make sure that the tracking scripts, for example, are only executed when you actually hit the page. Last but really important is that the AMP cache is an optional thing. So if your website is built on the AMP framework, it always works with AMP. Whether it's viewed directly or whether it's viewed in a cached version. So it's really an optional piece which basically give you like a bit of an extra performance benefit in these certain environments. So when you develop with AMP, it's important to always think about a couple of key principles. This is a non-comprehensive list, but it's important pieces you need to think about. So there, again, I said before, don't use custom JavaScript. You can now use custom JavaScript in AMP in a limited way, but I will not go into this further today. It's called AMP script, which is another component by AMP. So instead, use AMP components and the declarative attributes that it provides you, because that's much easier and it guarantees the performance that you want to have. Then AMP restricts CSS, so you can't have more than 50 kilobytes of CSS. So really think about becoming more granular with your style sheet. You don't really need to have one massive style sheet as it was back in the day. Today we have HTTP2, so it's not important to serve everything in a single file. And because when you split it out into different files, you can be much more granular with what you load for a certain page. So then you always must use the optimized AMP components for media files. For example, IMG is not allowed in AMP. Always use AMP IMG instead. The same is for example, for AMP video instead of a video tag, and the same for audio as well. If you have a web form, it has to post submit its data with an AJAX request, because if you do it without that, the entire page reloads, which is also not such a great user experience. And last but not least, the really important thing is really always develop with a user-first mindset. So for every feature that you want to implement, please consider does this benefit the user or does this only benefit me or my company? For an example, think about a pop-up that opens randomly, like for example, a pop-up that asks you to subscribe to the newsletter. This is terrible user experience because the user did not want this to happen. It just happened, and now so it's really annoying. And this kind of stuff is important. So really think about every interaction should be user invoked and should be user controlled. Nothing should happen without the user's consent. And now we move over to WordPress. So how can you use AMP in WordPress? A lot of these things here sound pretty hard. Like you don't want to replace all the IMG tags that you use with AMP IMG because it's annoying. Why would you want to do that? So in AMP, we have the official AMP plugin for WordPress, which you can download at wordpress.org in the plugin repository. And the AMP plugin is not your average WordPress plugin. In order to understand its purpose, we need to look at the WordPress ecosystem as a whole. So what the plugin does is it takes care of the majority of pieces that you need to take care of when you want to make your website AMP compatible. However, depending on the plugins and themes that you're using, some developer intervention may be required. While the WordPress ecosystem has already come a long way with AMP compatible plugins and themes, it's still just starting to take off. So therefore, today, the plugin is mostly targeted at developers because usually you need to do a little bit of work to make your site fully AMP compatible. However, as the WordPress ecosystem evolves, basically this doc will move further over there, until hopefully at some point it becomes possible for even someone who doesn't have any coding capabilities to build an AMP-compatible WordPress site. So what the AMP plugin does is it basically automates large parts of the process, as I mentioned. So it hooks into the WordPress content generation mechanisms to transform as much as it possibly can or automatically. Then for all the other part that it can't predict, it provides developer tools and guidance. And last but not least, just as the AMP framework allows you to always validate your site, the AMP plugin also monitors and enforces AMP compatibility throughout. So now let's look at an example for each of these features. So here, the AMP plugin basically, it sanitizes, as I said, the entire page content to fix any possible AMP violation that is predictable. For example, the plugin has a sanitizer that replaces all the AMG tags with AMP IMG tags, all the video tags with AMP video, and so on. And there are many sanitizers in the plugin, and you as a developer can also create your own ones if you want to sanitize certain other things that the AMP plugin doesn't do itself already. One of the most powerful features and one of the most powerful sanitizers is the so-called CSS tree shaker. So what that does, it compares all the CSS that you're actually loading, that you actually typically load, with everything that is actually in your page. So it removes all the stuff that's not needed, which, as you can see here, basically only 27% of the entire style sheets is relevant, so only that part is loaded, which is a massive performance benefit. So AMP ensures that only the rules that are needed for the current page are loaded by the current page. There are many things, again, in WordPress, though, depending on the plugin or theme, or even how you use WordPress, depending on that, that the AMP plugin cannot predict. But for that, it offers developer guidance. For example, here in Gutenberg, if you do anything in a block that violates AMP compatibility, the plugin will tell you that whatever you did in this block, like here, we just add a script which is not allowed like that. It will tell you contextually what you did wrong there. And then really important is, again, the validation piece. So the AMP plugin has internalized the entire AMP Validator specification. So it provides, whenever you go to a page on your website and it has a validation error, it will tell you that in the admin bar. And when you click on that, you get to this validation tool screen where you can see all the errors and what they are. And if you can see that here, but you can actually hit the details here and it will expand with more information. Mm. Yeah, I will get to this now. No problem. But here, so you have the, you can see here also where the bugs, where the issues are coming from. For example, which plugin or theme or maybe even WordPress core is causing that. And then what you can do is accept or reject these errors each by one by one. So for example, if you accept an error, the AMP plugin will automatically remove the offending markup. So basically, if you accept all errors, your page will definitely be AMP compatible. However, it's not as easy as it sounds, because of course, some of the stuff that you have here might be necessary for your website to function properly. There are some items that you will usually find some things that AMP has already solved, so you can really just accept an error and it will be fine. But in other cases, the function, for example, some custom scripts, they do something that you need to replace with an AMP compatible version. And if you just accept that error, your site will be AMP compatible, but the functionality might no longer work. So in that case, you can reject the error, which means this page where the error occurs will become AMP incompatible, at least temporarily. And then if you know how to fix it, you can fix it, and afterwards the error will be gone. Or you can also leave it, reject it, and not fix it because maybe you don't know yet how to do that. And in that case, you really just need to keep in mind this one page in your website is not AMP compatible, but you can always come back later when you learn more about it. Another important piece from the plugin are the 3 template modes. I want to start with the bottom here. The reader mode is the legacy mode that is basically this this blue bar template that we looked at the beginning, which is only recommended if you don't have any development skills or if you use any plugins or themes that are not AMP compatible. So basically, if you can't fix any AMP violations. But it's really not it's really not recommended otherwise, because it is a secondary version. It doesn't have to do anything with your website behavior otherwise, and it only allows you to provide a secondary AMP experience, at least for visitors coming to your site through an AMP cache. Then there's transitional mode, which is for when you want to migrate an existing site to make it AMP compatible. So you will still, in this mode, you will still have two versions, but the second version already uses your plugins and themes just like your regular website. So, and you can gradually transition everything to AMP and fix all the validation errors that are on there. And every page that has a validation error, it will redirect the user to the non-AMP version, but every page that works in AMP, it will directly use AMP. And then this is a stepping stone to get to standard mode, which is the preferred mode. It means that your site is AMP first, so there's only one version of your website, and it's entirely built on AMP. Again, still, if there is validation error that you reject, you can still gradually fix an issue here. But the most important piece about the standard mode is it is just one version of your website, which is definitely eventually what we want, right? You don't want to maintain two versions of your website. So when we revisit the first slide here, the left side is what is reader mode. You have a non-AMP version, and you have an AMP version which doesn't look like a theme. But the standard mode, which is the eventual goal, is really, it uses AMP on your website, and you just have that one version. So now, I don't know how much time we have left. Now we go to the hands-on workshop. So if you have downloaded, I don't know if you've seen the instructions that I posted before the event. So you can definitely follow along. Okay. So you can follow along in the. Now I need to. Okay. I just need to prepare a couple things here. What is this? What is the shortcut again for this? No. Oh, I think it's. Anyway, I can just do that. Okay, so if you've downloaded, if you've followed the steps in advance, then you may already have a WordPress website with all the setup needed. But if not, you can also definitely just follow along without following up. I also might need to be a little fast, so apologies for that. But you can definitely follow up at home, because the entire project that I have here is available on GitHub, and it has branches for each individual step, so you can really follow along then. So now let's look at this website, but now I can switch the tab. Oh, what is this? Okay. So this is the site that we're working with now. It's just some demo site for like some random plugin vendor that sells WordPress plugins with these great developers. It has a blog. It has a link here to the plugins, which just links to WordPress org here. It has an about page with some content and a contact page with a form. So when we, oops, that was wrong. So when we just open a post here, right now it's not AMP compatible because there's nothing done to make it AMP compatible, and the plugin here is not active. So now as I activate the AMP plugin, this, yeah. Okay.
Like loop or something like that, but it's not running.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, maybe we can look at that afterwards, because I have to speed it up a little. But apologies for that. But maybe you can follow along like that. So right now the plugin is set to reader mode. So now when I reload this post, this is not AMP at all, but there is a secondary AMP version which is linked here in the admin bar. So that is this. Now you're on this ugly blue bar layout, which is a secondary version of your site, which you can access by putting an extra AMP suffix here. But again, this is not what we want, so we're going to switch it to standard mode. And now in standard mode, now this is AMP, but there is a validation error here, actually 2. So now let's see what that is. Yeah, this is probably the most common thing that you will find if you start developing with AMP when you haven't made any changes. There is a script, there are actually 2 scripts being enqueued here. And now we can check. They both come from this awesome theme called WC Sevilla. And so let's see what it is here. There is a script that is called, yeah, so it's called navigation. It's a theme script, so it does probably something with the navigation menu. And the other thing is, of course, it depends very much on what you do with your theme or plugin. And here, this other script, as you can see what it contains, it's just an inline script that probably, well, I know, so it passes data to the other script, because you may know the function WP localize script, which allows you to send data from PHP to the JavaScript file, and that's what it does because it puts these translation strings to the JavaScript file. So now what we can do for a start is really just accept these errors and save. And now we go back to the front end, and now it's already AMP compatible, which is that was really easy, right? But now I also want to show how you can actually resolve the same error in the code. So this is the WP Sevilla theme that you will also have access to via the GitHub repository. And a typical thing that you should do in your theme is add isAmp function or something like that, because it makes it easier to call it. You could put it just random in your functions PHP and call it my theme isAmp or something. But this function would just only needs to call this thing here. It needs to check does the isAmp function exist, and if so, just call it, because that's the function that the AMP plugin provides to check if if a current page is being requested in AMP. Because while we build it, if you build an AMP compatible theme, you may still want to build it in a way that also someone without AMP can use it. So that with this check, that becomes easily possible. So now, well, obviously you need to know where this script would be enqueued. In this case here, the script is enqueued here. As you can see, this is the navigation JS script, and also below here it adds the other script which passes data to it. So now if we add the call to the function, here we just say if it is an AMP request, return immediately, don't enqueue the script. And if we now save and reload.
You should remove, because you won't have to, you won't have AMP on your site. So
Sorry?
yeah, I mean, you are telling that it is AMP return, but you should remove all the scripts, because
Well, it depends. If you only build an AMP compatible theme, you can also remove the scripts entirely, but you want to maybe you want to keep it work for someone who wants to use your theme without AMP.
but
If it's only for yourself, you can remove them. Yes, totally. So now, if we revalidate here, now the validation errors that were here before, they're actually gone. So what we just did, it didn't really fix anything because the errors were already accepted, but it's still better to properly fix that in your actual code if you can. So now let's go back to the front end. Again, it's AMP compatible. Yeah, that was easy, but this doesn't work anymore. Suddenly, yeah, this is broken because that was probably controlled by the script that if you click this button, if you click the button here, the menu should open. So now what we need to do is basically figure out how can we replicate this functionality with within an AMP compatible way. So let's look at that file here that included that took care of that we just removed from being loaded. So this right there, where is this? Yeah, this is the part where it looks at the menu toggle, which is this button here, and whenever you click it, it toggles a class on the navigation element, and this class is called nav toggle on here. It also sets an area expanded attribute on the button itself for accessibility. So now what we can do is, we need to replicate this in an AMP compatible way. This here is the theme template part file that renders this header bar and including the navigation dropdown. So in AMP, I think for the sake of it, I'm just gonna, for the sake of speed, 1 second. I'm just gonna So I didn't want to, for the sake of speed, I didn't want to write this right now, but so what we would need to do here is there is a component in AMP that's called AMP state, which allows you to capture any kind of state that can change over the course of time in your single page on your website. If you have worked with React, you might be familiar with a system like that. So what we do here is we add an AMP state. We just call it site navigation menu, but it could be called anything. And then we add a parameter that we also name properly, which should basically determine whether your menu is expanded or not. So this is the initial state. So in initial state, it should be closed again, because of course we don't want it to open immediately. And what you can do then is listen to the value of, or look at the basically bind attributes to the value of this state property. So here, and binding a value in AMP, what it works like is you need to add an attribute, but in these square brackets, and then you can put like minimal JavaScript-like logic in there. For example, here we look at the site navigation menu, which is this, and its expanded value, and if it is true, then we include all the regular classes that are already here, but we also include the nav toggle on class. Or if it is false, it really just falls back to the original classes here. And then here on the button, we need to make sure that when you click the button, this state property here changes. So we listen to the tab event, and then we call AMP set state, which is the function AMP provides you to change the state value. And we use, again, the names that we gave this property, and simply set it to the opposite of what it was set before, basically toggling the value on and off. And what that does now is that we've basically made this available in an AMP compatible fashion. So now the menu works again. Then there's also so now, but I want to quickly show another thing. I will do that really quickly now. But imagine now you have this here on a desktop, this drop-down menu, which on a desktop looks kind of weird because it really takes up a lot of space here in the content that you would actually probably want to read. So let's say your designer says, let's not do this. It's not user-friendly. It's not so great for user experience. So let's instead use a slide-in menu that comes from the left side. We could do that. So for that, I just want to quickly show that. AMP offers a component specifically for that purpose, which is really easy to use. You can browse the AMP website to see all information about all the components that exist. So now we can use this AMP sidebar component to implement the menu here as a sidebar. And again, I want to quickly speed that up. So what I did now is I just added I switched to another branch which had this which already had the AMP sidebar added to the page. So I only add this element when it is an AMP context because it doesn't work outside of AMP. So if you're outside of AMP, we just leave the other UI for now, which is this, which is loaded here. If not AMP, then it still keeps the old UI. But if AMP, then we place the AMP sidebar here. And what we then need to do is, just update the area controls attribute here because it now doesn't control this header bar anymore, which is this black-white bar, but it controls the AMP sidebar dropdown because the AMP sidebar. And the AMP sidebar, because it is a specific custom element from AMP, it has an actual function. It supports an actual action that you can call, which is called toggle, and you just toggle it on and off with this action. So I added this here too to the listener for the tab event. So basically on tab, we still set this value here because the value is actually not needed by the AMP sidebar component, but it is needed, for example, to still set this area expanded attribute here properly based on whether the menu is open or not. But for the AMP sidebar itself, we just call the site sidebar toggle action. And after that, we have this AMP sidebar here, which, yeah, it just takes away much less space from the actual page content, which is a bit nicer. So, yeah, okay. So let me just bring that back. Is it? Wait. Okay, yeah. So now that we've looked at a basic way how you can interact with the plugin, and again, I know, apologies, this was really quick. But I'm also here for the rest of the weekend, so maybe if you're interested in some of this, we can also look at it maybe at the site of the conference or at any time at this weekend. So I just want to briefly mention that, of course, preferably you don't even want to run into validation errors. So it's important to know how you can find AMP-compatible pieces like plugins and themes for your WordPress site. In order to build an AMP-compatible WordPress site, all the components of your site need to be AMP-compatible, right? So you need to either use a theme that is fully AMP-compatible, or maybe you need to, you'll find a theme that really satisfies your needs, but it has a few minor errors. In that case, you might be able to fix the errors in a child theme. Or if the same with plugins, you should look for plugins that are fully AMP-compatible, but sometimes plugins aren't fully compatible, but there's still all the functionalities that you need from them, they might already be compatible. For example, think about Jetpack, which offers 1 million features, but only some of them today are AMP compatible, while others are not. But if you only use those ones, then you're definitely fine. So the AMP plugin website, includes the ecosystem showcase, where you can find a selection of AMP compatible WordPress themes and plugins. Again, this list is rather limited today because we're still, the ecosystem still needs to catch up on making the plugins AMP compatible. And now to wrap up, I just want to point you to these resources where you can learn more about that, which is first of all amp.dev, which is the website on the AMP framework itself. Then we have the AMP plugin website, where you find documentation on how to use the plugin. So basically, you need to look at a combination of both. Here, it includes the documentation on all the available AMP custom elements and all the AMP components and how they all work. And this includes documentation on how the plugin specifically works. I also want to give a special shout out to this page on amp.dev, which includes the project roadmap, so you can look at what's on the horizon. Also keep in mind that you can contribute to it, just like you can contribute to WordPress. So you can you can download the project on GitHub and start adding or open issues, open PRs. Yeah, and yeah, it was. I know it was it was probably a lot of stuff in a short time, and especially the coding was a bit too quick, so I couldn't even live code it. But I'm here for the rest of the weekend, and again, I'm happy to talk about this further. If you have any questions, if you have any feedback, if you have any concerns, I'm happy to address them, or hopefully. And yeah, and last but not least, si habláis muy lentamente, puede ser que podemos comunicar en español también. Gracias. Do we have time for questions or no? Or if there are any questions.
You can answer a question while I copy the files.
Yeah, are there any questions? Yep.
So would you say the AMP plugin is an essential plugin in the sense of having it by default maybe involved in the projects to develop with WordPress as a platform?
Yeah, I think, so again, building an AMP compatible site is not trivial today because you need to usually modify the code to make it AMP compatible, but I think especially, I always want to emphasize that especially if you build a new project, then it's a good thing to start building it in an AMP compatible way. Migrating an existing one, which might be a massive project with 20 plugins or more, it can become really complex, but especially if you think about AMP and performance like that from the start, then it's definitely feasible. And in that you can really install and activate the AMP plugin at the beginning of your development process and always make sure it stays AMP compatible. Yep.
When do you think we will get to the end of the road? I mean,
Sorry?
when will we get to the end of that road?
That very much depends on all the plugin and theme developers, maybe in this room out there. So yeah, we're actively engaging with the WordPress community here and outside of in other WordCamps. So yeah, we collaborate with other agencies to make their plugins AMP compatible too, and we also offer support for anyone who wants to make their plugins or themes that are publicly available AMP compatible. Don't hesitate reaching out to us if you need any help or advice. But I can't, I don't know how long it would take. Yes.
I just wanted to ask if there is any starter theme for AMP or something.
Oh yeah. So there's WP Rig, which is it's a WordPress starter theme focused on modern best practices. So that includes that theme is AMP compatible by default. It's also, you can still use it also if you don't build something for AMP, but it has AMP support. So that is a good theme to look at. Yeah.
You gave a list of compatible themes with AMP. I guess in the AMP website we have for those themes, or we have to in the AMP website.
Yeah.
We have these compatible themes, or we have to look for them separately.
The AMP, I'm sure there's definitely the AMP website, the plugin website. It doesn't have all the AMP compatible themes, but it has a selection. Yes, so that's a good place to start looking at. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also, I want to give a specific. If anyone here is using Genesis, the Genesis framework is now, since version 3.0, fully AMP compatible. So chances are high that in the near future you get to see more and more Genesis themes also AMP compatible. Yeah, if that's it. And if you have a longer question, yeah, you can hit me up later this weekend. Thank you.